history is not simply a study of other people, it's a study of us
Mm,
because our ancestors created the societies we live in, the traditions that we uphold or choose not to uphold, and the things that perhaps we're going to be challenging today or in the future. So I see understanding history as important for so many reasons. First of all, it helps us to understand the society we live in, as I alluded to before. It helps us to understand change.
mm,
It helps us to be able to understand the cultures
mm,
and perspectives of others while giving us a broad perspective at the same time. It helps us to get a clearer moral understanding, in my viewpoint. And in understanding our customs, our traditions, our values, that also helps us to become better citizens and
mm,
to work together to not only improve the community we have today, but perhaps work on making it better for our descendants or
mm,
our children and our grandchildren who are going to come after us. And it's important also, I think, to study history so that we can see conflicting viewpoints.
mm,
We can understand what happened in the perspective of those who were living at that time. Because when we study history, we can't impose our current situation on people who lived 100 or 1,000 years ago. We have to take into account the context of what was going on then. Who were these people, but what were they dealing with? What was going on at the time? Who were the influencers upon them at that time? And history to me is so interesting because we study the primary sources, which we so often neglect today.
mm,
So we're studying the letters, the journals, the diaries, th all of those critical pieces that help us to understand what really was going on then. And history wasn't instantaneous 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Today, we have the benefit of instant communication, but that is both an advantage and a disadvantage in some respects.
mm,
So it
mm.
doesn't give us the ability to sit down and reflect, to really think deeper about the meanings of things. We
Yeah,
just we want that instant answer,
yeah.
and it's that in turn helps to put us into very segmented, rigid groups. And of course, that discourages a deeper discussion of of the issues because sometimes in history, the answer to a question is that there's no answer at
Mm,
all.
mm,
There are multiple reasons for what happened. There are multiple people involved. There are multiple perspectives. And sitting here today, we can't judge and provide that one definitive answer.
mm. Yeah, there's something so deeply ingrained in that that is psychological and sociological of that reflective, thoughtful nature of understanding history. I mean, I've heard you talk before. I listened to some other podcasts and things you've done. I think, and we all fall victim to this at times. I think sometimes when we think about history, it's about the story, it's about the facts and the dates and the information, and there's a lot of value in that. I think it's good for us to learn about the things and understand what happened, but the way you're positioning it is much deeper than that. It's understanding the why behind it. It's understanding what happened, as you said, the letters, the journals, really trying to get and empathize and get inside people's heads and understand what they were trying to do and make sense of the situation. There's such a deep value in that, particularly as you talk about it when you think about today, that's such a useful skill to have to be able to look at the situation we find ourselves in today and try and make sense of, well, why is this person
Mhm.
doing that? Or why is that person doing that? And it's funny as you talk about it, it's almost like I'll use the term cheat code, and that's probably not the right term, and it's probably stretching it too much. But to be able to look back and say, historically, we can look at situations when people did things we didn't understand and really try and make sense of it and see what the implications were and how it played out and how people reacted and how it made people feel. That's such a valuable tool to be able to look at today as we're trying to figure out how to live our best lives and how to kind of create the world that we want it to be in. There's just so much richness in that to make sense of. So that resonates with me so deeply. I think what makes it hard often for people to not get that value out of it, or maybe even sometimes why they don't want to look, is the emotional part of it. As we start to look at some of those things and understand those events, we can't help but get angry sometimes, or
Mhm.
get scared or fearful or whatever it is. How do you think about that aspect of it? Because that emotional piece can come in. We can have such visceral reactions to some of those things, which stop us from learning. Because to learn in the way you're talking about it, you really have to have a completely open mind to take in all the information and understand it. And those emotions and things can sometimes close that off a bit, right? Emotions, biases, all sorts of different things. How do you think about that when you're trying to get that full value out of history that you're speaking of?
Yeah, that really is a critical point. History is based on fact, but you're always going to have that opinion
Mm,
creeping in.
mm,
Uh, if we have a fossil, we can study it. We can get factual data from it. But again, we have that fossil. We don't have the luxury of being able to speak
mm,
to it. We can guess, we can learn about the culture surrounding it, but we can't go back and get that opinion. And I think one of the most important things that history does is it teaches us how to think critically.
mm,
If you were going to be a historian, it's all some in some respects it's similar to science. I mean, you're focusing on a problem, so you're taking a hypothesis, okay? You come up with a question that you want to find an answer to, and then you test various possibilities